Okay, it seems like we are live. The time is ours. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. Welcome to the Sub-Saharan Driving Recovery Session. My name is Jean Philbert Nsengimana. I'm the African Managing Director at the Commons Project. I'm also a member of the advisory board of Startup Genomes, which is one of the organizers of this session. I'm joining you from Cambridge, Massachusetts in the US, where I have spent my last year as a fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School. I spent a lot of time thinking about how Africa could leverage digital entrepreneurship to leapfrog into the future. Prior to that, I served as the Minister of Youth and Information Technology in the government of Rwanda, and also spent 1 year at Smart Africa as the special advisor. The annual Global Startup Ecosystem Report 2020 by Startup Genome was launched today, just in the previous session. Predictably, COVID-19 is taking a heavy toll on the startup economy around the world, and in Africa in particular. Layoffs are rampant. Firstly, the double impact of drop in consumer demand and VC investment flows, startups are cash trapped. The report says that 4 out of 10 are reporting a runway that is less than 3 months. And the research was concluded by 31st of March. So as we speak, many of those startups could actually be dead. There are some good news, however. Historically, a lot of startups were born during the recessions, including notable unicorns. Indeed, necessity is the mother of invention. A few startups in selected sectors were actually boosted by the crisis. One thing is clear, however, the startup economy is going through a major transition. To talk about those questions, I have a fantastic lineup of speakers. I have Dr. Shikoh Gitau, Joshin Raghubar, and Adenike Adeyemi. I'll start with you, Dr. Shikoh. But first, let me introduce you. Shikoh is the CEO of Qhala, a digital innovation company that catalyzes digital transformation capabilities for organizations across Africa. She previously worked with the Africa Development Bank, where she was leading and advising governments across Africa to adopt ICT for service delivery. She developed the Digital Government Blueprint, a strategic document to guide governments in digital transformation, now adopted by Smart Africa. She has also worked with Google and Microsoft in their emerging market teams. She has received numerous awards and recognitions of her efforts in influencing business and government as well as technology. Dr. Shikoh has also recently been appointed on Kenya's government digital COVID-19 task force. Dr. Shikoh, governments in Africa have deployed various COVID-19 response strategies, including measures to support tech ecosystems and startups more specifically. Can you share one concrete example of a policy that is working in your country or across your network that could be emulated by others? And tell us if there is something that you think is possible but not being done enough in support of startups.
So, I mean, I'll talk about thank you very much, JP, allow me to call you that. I'm glad to be on this panel. Thank you to the Next Web and Startup Genome for inviting me. I'm really excited about this season in our life. It's a sad season, but it's also a good opportunity for people and startups to showcase themselves. I'll talk, to answer your question, I'll talk about the Kenyan ecosystem. What we are seeing is a lot of government policies and efforts towards making sure that the startups and SMEs don't die. So we have the government has shown a stimulus package, about 3 billion Kenya shillings towards SME revitalization during this season. But what I'm excited about is where I'm sitting at the Ict Coverage Committee, where the government has has put in place a committee to find and support startups and innovators who are doing something around the response, but not only just the response, but also the recovery season of COVID. So we are not looking at just, let's build an app for contact tracing. We are looking at beyond contact tracing, what else should we be doing? Yeah, how will the country recover? But the most exciting thing is some of these startups that are doing things around education and e-learning at home, e-commerce, and everybody who's pivoted. We are seeing the future beyond COVID. And one of the questions, like we were talking to e-commerce vendors and e-commerce entrepreneurs, and you're asking them what is your biggest fear, even as you're pivoting towards e-commerce, and they're asking, will this be a sustainable habit of people buying things online? Because the whole problem about trust has been erased by COVID. You're forced to stay at home, so you're forced to trust that e-commerce is going to deliver for you food and other necessities at home. So the biggest question is this behavior going to be sustainable beyond COVID? And the answer is yes, because when you talk to consumers, they realize it is cheaper and more convenient to buy online. So what COVID has done is it has delivered for us an opportunity to be able to showcase the power of technology. Second, it has showcased just that the globe is actually flat when technology is in place. Kids are able now to be able to learn from everywhere in the world. Kids are able to learn from anywhere in the world, from any content in the world. So, like in many WhatsApp groups about parents, we are seeing people sharing what is it called? They're sharing their own content from across the world. So I have a 4-year-old, for example, and I was like, what is this thing called e-learning? It's impossible to teach a child at home. And then I was sent for materials, some nice videos, some nice worksheets that I can easily print and give my 4-year-old to easily work. So I'm consuming content from the US, and it's pretty effective when it comes to our kids. So for me, it is just seeing the change in perception of our consumers in Africa towards technology, and how technology can actually solve our problems as Africa. And the government is seeing that. So all these catalytic things that are happening. The committee, the fund that the government has rolled out, not only for SMEs but also for creatives. There's a creative fund, $1 million that the government is giving to the creative community to be able to showcase their work and protect them from the effects of COVID. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Let me turn to you. She talks about SMEs pivoting, people having more trust in digital economy and digital platforms. Now the perceptions are changing, and the government injecting a bit of oxygen into the ecosystem. So that is from Kenya. Joshin, from where you are, I'd like to introduce Joshin to you. Joshin is a South African entrepreneur in the media, marketing, and technology sectors. He's the founder and executive chairperson of iKineo Ventures, founder of Explore Sideways, and a leading immersive travel company, and purveyor of premium private wine, food, and culture tourism experience. A director and investor in Strive, a growth science firm that helps clients turn data into revenue. A co-founder of Proud Performance Partners, South African leading digital media performance firm, a founder of AdBot, an AI software as a service platform that automates online search advertising for business. Wow, what an entrepreneur, to talk about the situation of entrepreneurs and what governments are doing in his network or in South Africa that he would like to see being done more in other parts of the continent, and what the areas of improvement. Over to you, Joshin.
Thank you so much. You probably forgot it's easy to miss, but the most important venture for me is the social impact work that I'm engaged with as chairperson of the Cape Innovation and Technology Initiative, which has been developing the technology ecosystem in our region for the last 20 years. and now we're more broadly working in South Africa, and we started to work across the continent, specifically with the mandate of building strong, vibrant, inclusive technology ecosystems. So I'll talk to you about what's happening certainly in our environment and what governments have been doing. Governments have been fantastic in stepping up in supporting SMEs like they have in Kenya, like Dr. Shikoh has talked about, providing large-scale funding. Unfortunately, this often misses the startups because a lot of this SME funding is channeled by way of soft loans, and typically dispersed by the banks or similar partners. And so they're looking for companies that have been showing profits, showing that companies that typically they would lend to. And many startups are still in the growth phase or pre-profitability stage. So unfortunately, many startups are just missed by these, I think, very, very good government efforts, but they're aimed at SMEs rather than startups. So what is happening for startups? So I can talk to you in Cape Town. Our organization runs quite a few incubation and acceleration programs. We're lucky enough to be supported in many of these programs by local government, the City of Cape Town. And over this period, the City of Cape Town has seen that these incubation programs and supporting startups is incredibly important. So during the last few months, in fact, we've got increased funding from the City of Cape Town to scale up our incubation programs and to move them into virtual delivery. So that's been fantastic. We've seen a wonderful support both to double the size of our programs, but to also move them into the virtual environment. So I think there's been a recognition, particularly at the local level, the city at the city level, that startups are a very, very important part of this economy, and we need to support them. That's been fantastic. The second part is that at City, one of our biggest pillars has been in helping people move into digital jobs. And we work with taking young unemployed people, giving them the skills, both professional and technical skills for digital jobs and moving them into the digital economy and placing them. And of course, this has been a very difficult time when we've had to move people off campus and into remote learning environments. And unlike a lot of parts of the world, and I'm sure very much like many parts of Africa, it's very difficult for many of these young people to learn at home for whatever their home circumstances, but particularly because maybe the only form of connectivity is the phone. And it's easier to learn on a laptop, it's easier to learn on a computer rather than a phone. So we've had some wonderful support from national government, what we call the Jobs Fund. That's provided us some relief funding to actually subsidize our cohorts with infrastructure and data. So laptops and data, so they can continue their learning journey at home. It's been really, really great. And I think that's important to think about. These are really real problems. People don't have laptops, they don't have data. So if you want to move people to remote learning environments, think about what else they need to do that. And I think, I believe we've had a really great support, and that could be replicated. And I'll touch on maybe just one more part. I've got lots of things to talk about. Just one more before you can move on. Is that quite early on, government let the e-commerce providers and startups continue to work during the lockdown. First, it was just essential goods, food, masks, etc., and allowed e-commerce to really flourish during this lockdown, and it worked. And then just as we progressed into the first few weeks and months of lockdown, they also recognized that this was an opportunity for e-commerce companies in general to operate while physical stores couldn't open. So then they encouraged and allowed e-commerce to really flourish. And that has obviously been very positive for e-commerce companies in general and specifically for startups. It's everyone has pivoted their businesses into now online stores, e-commerce offerings, and then can you imagine everything that kind of grows around that. Digital payment, last mile delivery, everything that kind of goes around that has really flourished. And that's, and that wouldn't have happened if government had just put a blanket ban on e-commerce as well. So I'll leave it there and we can talk a lot more as we develop the conversation.
Absolutely. Government enabling e-commerce, contributing to build trust into digital platforms and jobs fund from South Africa. So let me turn to Adenike. Adenike is the CEO of Faith Foundation. She comes with 19 years experience in non-for-profit management, enterprise development, strategy, and organization transformation in the private, public, and non-for-profit sector. As the executive director of Faith Foundation, she leads the organization's focus on enabling Nigerian entrepreneurs to start, grow, and scale their businesses through incubation, growth support, and acceleration programs. Serving a community of 6,000 entrepreneurs, she has led the organization to secure partnerships from major local and international organizations, while at the same time pioneering flagship programs and initiatives such as the Scale Up Lab, MSME Hub, and more. Adenike, give us your take.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everyone. To respond to your question in terms of what we've seen from a policy perspective, and in terms of investing and supporting in startups during COVID, I'm going to respond to that in looking at 3 different segments. So looking at government support at the federal level, government support at the state level, and then what we're seeing in terms of private and government collaborations. As you can imagine, Nigeria is a big country. We're 180 million people. As at the last count, we have over 40 million micro, small, and medium entrepreneurs, and startups are also gradually becoming a significant part of that, particularly those driven and led by businesses. So even in this time of crisis, for a country that recently came out of recession and was just grappling again in terms of economic regrowth and development, this was something that people were worried about in terms of the impact on startups and the ecosystem in general. And so when I think one of the advantages that I think we are, not just Nigeria, but African countries saw, was that a lot of all the impacts, we've already started to see them from some of the other continents. So we were not really surprised. We already knew what was coming. From the government perspective, the federal government about 2 months ago launched a targeted credit facility, similar to, I think, what Shikoh had said. This is largely for micro, small, and medium enterprises. And then there were some funds that were also targeted at businesses within the health services sector, and then also within the agribusiness in particular. But again, you know, that fund is really, really small, given this number of businesses that we have, and it's not really startup focused. It's really just general small and growing businesses across the country focused. So that's one of the things that we've seen. We need larger types of those types of funds, and definitely more in terms of industry specific support and funding at the federal level. But again, a lot of things are happening at the subnational level. And I'll use Lagos State, which is like the commercial nerve center of Nigeria, as an example. There's an institution called the Lagos State Science, Innovation and Research Council. And one of the things they did was they launched an innovation competition for startups who are innovating and developing ideas or startups within that are focused on helping to solve things in the pandemic. So whether in terms of traceability, whether in terms of solving issues around education, particularly education for the mass markets, those who don't readily have access to internet and laptops like Josh had described. So issues also around agribusiness, so really around sectoral change. And they've called for that, and the council is reviewing innovative ideas and businesses, and with the intent to fund and provide support. So that's the second example. The third example is the one that I think I will speak on a bit more. And what we've seen, and what I have seen a lot really, and where I think we've seen more impact, is really where the private sector, corporates, the development sector, and even some of the key donor partners that we've had are working with government to review, to think, and to say, okay, this is a huge problem. How do we address this? We launched a survey about 2-3 months ago, where we profiled over 1,900 businesses. About 68% of them were startups, you know, and similar to the data that was shared earlier on, over maybe only about 20 or 30% had a runway for about 1 to 4 weeks for cash. And so you're seeing people significantly affected. And what what the private sector has come in different ways and in different segments is to say, okay, how can we collaborate and work with government? How can we also enable startups who are building businesses, but also build businesses that can help to address critical issues? So there's an example, for instance, where one of the major startups in Nigeria is working with one of the major medical research laboratories to improve the process of testing, expanding testing, doing driving testing, and also developing home test kits. There's also the ones where there are certain startups that are being funded by private sector or supported, let me say, by private sector to work with state governments to develop educational products and platforms to reach students, particularly in public schools, who require the knowledge and the access that it is. And so for me, the lessons around that is that, and when we talk about ecosystem, is everybody bringing the value that they have to the table. Because if government is broke, and our government really is broke, and that really is the truth of the matter, and we're talking about a large mass and population of people, but you have startups who are challenged, who cannot, because of the lockdown and some of the other challenges, trying to see how they can grow, thrive, even at this time. You need everybody coming into part to create those linkages that are important. And so, and particularly for sectors that the socioeconomic impact is really critical. So social agribusiness, education, health services in particular. And also again, and I'm sure even we're seeing this in other countries where people, because a lot of people sustain themselves on daily wages, we cannot afford to have as long as a lockdown time as a lot of other countries are having, because people earn daily wages. So part of the things that we're also seeing is that innovative thinking to say, okay, how can we gradually release the lockdown in a safe way, and how can we involve innovative startups also on that journey to ensure that reopening the economy, but we're also working with startups that can help to address a lot of the key challenges that we've seen in this space.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ade. So one thing is really a common thread in everyone's contribution. I see a very strong sense that startups are now more than ever recognized as a critical player in our economies, in the response to COVID, in the recovery and the resilience of our economies moving forward. Time fly. I realize that we still have 5 minutes. I want to take a second round of questions, and I want to sort of ask each one of you to spend just 1 minute reflecting about what you as an entrepreneur, because all of you are entrepreneurs, what has been your personal experience and what you see as becoming the new normal. Do you see the post-COVID world as a better environment for startups, or it's going to be harder? It's going to be a long winter? Let me start now with Joshin. Joshin, is this boosting you or killing you?
So this is it's a bit of both, frankly. You know, as you saw in my bio, I'm invested in a number of businesses, and each business has a specific challenge. So you can imagine the tourism businesses are particularly challenged. Right. But we're getting really great traction in our businesses, our technology businesses with digital products, specifically businesses that are helping other startups. So we're getting great traction in those businesses. So it's been a mixed bag in my personal experience, but there have been fantastic green shoots for the businesses that have digital products, and particularly that focused on other companies that are moving to the digital space. So and then wearing my hat in the nonprofit space, look, we've had to jump in to support where support is really needed. But we're also seeing wonderful green shoots there. The move to learn from home, the move to work from home. So we're repurposing a lot of our people that we're training to actually do desktop support, for instance, for people that now have to work from home and provide that virtual support. So there's a lot of work we're doing to pivot ourselves into the new normal.
Cool. Ade.
Yes. So in response to that, we're a nonprofit that we support entrepreneurs in different ways. And for us, what has been very critical for us over the last few weeks is really to how do you help to support people in financial and non-financial ways to build resilience and to also sort of sustain whatever income that they can do at the time. So even critical knowledge around how do you manage your cash flow, how are you more efficient, what are some of the other support services that you can quickly take advantage of with that. How do you also, one of the things we've also done with helping people to support a lot of people in that digitization phase, because we somewhat assume that it's easy for people to get on the internet, to get on a platform, to learn, to engage, but we realized that it was a challenge, particularly in non-commercial centers like Lagos. So how do you reach out to other parts of the country where there are entrepreneurs there who really need to get their businesses online, so to speak, and linking them with the resources and the opportunities that they can do that. And the third part of what we've also been doing, because engagement is very critical for us, and engagement particularly with government and key development partner ecosystem stakeholders, because for us, it was to say, okay, what exactly is happening? We understand, everybody knows that businesses were challenged, but if you get actual data on where the challenges are, one can better drive the policy advocacy through that. So how are young people being affected? What is the impact on jobs in the short to mid to long term? And because jobs are the mainstay of the economy, and and small business really provide up to about 70% of the jobs, how do you ensure that there is the support for that to continue to go on and to be that? So policy advocacy at the national and subnational level has been very, very critical for us over the last 6 to 8 weeks.
Great. We have 1 minute left. Dr. Shikoh. Are you muted? We can't hear you.
Yes, I was muted. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
So these past few months have been very exciting for me, just being able to work very closely with government. And the one thing this morning somebody asked me is, what's the future of digitization in government? And I'm saying the future is very, very bright. I can confidently say that at least the Kenyan government, and I feel that the other African governments that have been asking questions, is they're now relying on data to make decisions. It's no longer like a gut feeling or a finger in the sky, or my friend told me this, or a quick internet search. Is what is data telling us about X or Y or Z? That is exciting, and it's something that because it has shown, COVID is giving us a POC on data, like, here's a proof of concept data can work in decision making. Let's continue doing this, and I'm hoping that happens. The number 2 is remote work. Many startups struggle finding space and validation. The validation as a startup is, can I be able to prove that I'm working?
Dr. Shikoh, we are on the top of the hour. If you can wrap up quickly. I'm moderating the next question. They're waiting for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the thing is, how do you squash in, how do you validate yourself as a startup? But now I can say I'm a startup, I have a remote team, and people actually say, oh, Facebook is remote, Andela is remote, Google is remote, everybody can be remote. It makes starting a startup in Africa now much more viable, and I can hire from anywhere in the world. And finally, I think this pivoting into something great is what we should all be looking at, and seeing that Africa is now building our own tools because everybody else is closed up. We're able to solve solutions, and they're acceptable and adaptable to our context. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Joshin, Ade, and Shikoh. It's been a fantastic conversation, to be continued online. Please find the Startup Genome report and going. For those following us, please connect to the speakers through their LinkedIn profiles, and to me as well. I'd like to have this conversation continued. I had leadership, I had partnership, I had entrepreneurship. Have a nice day. Thank you.
Thank you.